This special Shed Online interview comes to you from the 2012 Formula One Qantas Australian Grand Prix. We talked to Peter Hackett and James Brock about cars and racing. Gentlemen, welcome to the Shed Online.
You're welcome.
My pleasure.
Tell us what you do. How did you become interested in high performance driving and what attracted you to the sport?
I didn't follow your typical race car driver path as most kids do these days, you know, in the karts at, a very early age. I didn't start driving until I was 22. I started off in a historic touring car in a purple XU1 Tirana. And then...
We still laugh at that car, really.
It was a good car, come on.
It was purple.
It might have ended up in the ditch the first time we took it out, but it's still a good car. And then moved on to a category called Future Tourers, which ultimately had no future, but they were a good category to begin with. They're very small V8 supercars, basically. Played around with V8 Ute Series for a long time, in and out of that, and that's definitely a lot of fun. It's a fairly entertaining and demanding category to do well in. Usually it's just trying to avoid all the crashing that's going on. It's the most challenging part of that. I've also been lucky enough to drive some V8 supercars from time to time, and now obviously I get the pleasure of driving the SLS GT3 in the Australian GT Championship. At this point in time, I'm obviously lucky enough to work with Pete with the Mercedes Benz brand, and we also get to drive on the racetrack in a sister car to Peter's. So pretty lucky at this point in time. Very happy to be here.
It's tough being in an SLS GT3. I mean, there's only 60 of them in the world.
Yeah.
They're left-hand drive, purpose-built race cars, but we don't get to drive those every day. This is a weekend job for us, if you like. I entered a world scholarship, actually. There's a racing driver school in England called the Jim Russell Racing Driver School. It's rather famous. I entered in their 1 week intensive racing driver school, how to be a race driver in a week, and used the money that I'd gained to do that course. And at the end of that week, they do a race, and I won that race. I won it comprehensively. And in Europe, I went as far as the next step was Formula 3. That's £1 million a year to do. And again, the sponsorship challenge became a bit of a problem. Legged it back home with my tail between my legs and picked up a Formula 3 seat here. And at the end of the day, I've tried to spend my entire life in and out of cars at racetracks, and in my position of chief instructor at Mercedes Benz, I'm pretty much there.
You must be naturally competitive people. What motivates you in your career?
For me, the motivation is just to do the best that I can at any given time, whether I win or whether I come 10th. Obviously, it's nicer to finish up the front, but for me, it's just being able to do the best job that you possibly can in that point in time and not make any mistakes.
Yeah, see, I'm the opposite. I'm here to win. I'm not happy with anything other than stepping off the top step. As an individual, to do a perfect lap or to create a perfect race is almost non-existent, because there's so many variables, so many things change, and the attempt to create perfection, which doesn't exist, is what I'm challenged by. So, I think if you ever got out of a car and said, that's it, that was perfect, you're probably in the wrong sport, because I don't think even, Nico Rosberg or Michael Schumacher ever get out of a car and say, that's it, that's perfect.
While we've obviously talked about it quite differently, I think ultimately our goals are pretty similar.
Yeah.
It's the goal for me is to achieve perfection for myself, and the closer you get to that, the success will come against the others.
Racing a car obviously takes a lot of physical fitness, but what about the mental game? How do you mentally prepare for a race, and what goes through your mind when you're out there on the track?
In my opinion, the mental side of it is the most difficult and demanding part of it. If you don't have your head together or in the right place, it doesn't matter what you've got underneath you and the team you've got around you, you're not going to succeed. Having the heritage that I did, there's some fairly big shoes to fill. Some fairly large expectations from those around me, and ultimately, it was impossible to meet those expectations, and I had fairly high expectations of myself as well. I obviously didn't want to go out there and not be successful and tarnish the family name or reputation, and that weighed really heavily on me and ultimately wore me down a bit, and it got to the point where I literally, even though I was out there doing it, I wasn't enjoying it, and if you're not enjoying it, you don't do well and you don't succeed. And it took me a few years of stepping out of it and reassessing the situation and really coming back into it now and having the opportunity to do this with Pete and Mercedes Benz and Erebus Racing. It's just it's like a fresh start for me basically, and it's great to come in with a good group of people that I know well. So there's that support around you. You know, you've got a cohesive group of people that all get along really well. It's like a family, and that's how it works for me. It's different for everyone, but for me, this is the sort of environment that I need to do well.
For me, mentally, preparation begins weeks before, months before, even years before, planning what you want to do if you get to this situation. There's so many ifs, buts and maybes in our industry that you always imagine what it's going to be like, but the instant you get an opportunity, you have to respond. You don't have time to change. And in a car while you're on track, you're traveling so quickly that every 1/10 of a second is incredibly important and potentially life-threatening, not only for yourself, but for the people around you, your colleagues, your friends. So, mentally you cannot switch off. You just can't. And, for me, that's also part of the challenge.
What about some career highlights?
Highlights? For me, Macau Grand Prix, World Cup of Formula 3, finished 7th.
For me, probably a couple of races at Bathurst. Bathurst is just, an amazing place. A place that my family has pretty huge history there. I was able to compete in a race with my dad in the V8 Ute Series there, which we won. And also in 1999, probably my first race at Bathurst, I managed to win in a V8 Commodore, so that was a pretty special moment.
Okay, fellas, last question. Who do you think will win Sunday's Formula One race?
It's a tough one.
Yeah, I think Nico Rosberg can win. I really believe that Mercedes GP is in a position this year to take race wins. Sebastian Vettel will be incredibly strong. Of the outsiders, Jenson Button. He's the guy that just gets in there and does the hard yards and gets to the end. But the forecast right now is just unpredictable, and I think it'll be one of those Australian Grand Prix where the conditions may have a big influence as well.
Peter Hackett and James Brock, thanks for joining us on the Shed Online. Enjoy the race.
Thanks very much.